Ottawa County, we are back with a fresh cut and a new episode of Ottawa Out Loud. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is episode 3. We have a great show for you here today. Very informative. I actually took it easy on the funny stuff. There's no game afterwards. It's just pure information about Ottawa County's Department of Strategic Impact's small footprint housing concept. Very cool project. I'm really excited for you to hear all of that information we have for you today. We got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to get right into announcements. You may remember in the last episode I mentioned that the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office has some seminars on how to avoid financial scams. They're for all ages, no registration required. There's one more date here in April 15th at Our Lady of the Lake. That's at 7 p.m. Don't get got. Our Veteran Services Department is doing another coffee and donuts event. That is going to be Tuesday, April 22nd. At the Fillmore Admin Building in the main conference room. So when you walk in to the upper floor of the Fillmore building, take a right and go down the hall till you see a sign that says main conference room. That is also going to include a presentation on chronic pain and fatigue and some different options and solutions. So if you are a veteran, if you have a family member who's a veteran, or if you're just generally interested in the health, well-being, and community of Ottawa County veterans, please go to that event. It's Tuesday, April 22nd. That is from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Next up is Art for the Parks. That is going to be Saturday, April 26th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Nature Education Center at Hemlock Crossing Park in West Olive. It's going to be a great evening. You're going to see all sorts of different types of art there: painting, photography, jewelry, sculpture, ceramics, fiber art, and more. You'll get to enjoy some live music, a cash bar, and a food truck, which will all be available for you. Registration is not required, but will allow you to skip the line when you come in. So if you'd like to register, you can do that at the link below. They are just suggesting a $10 donation to help support the Ottawa County Parks Foundation. Next up, registration for the Grand Explorers Trail Race is now open. Hashtag 2 parks, 1 race. There are options for a 10K or a 5K for adults, and then for kids, there is a 1 mile kids fun run or fun walk. This is, like a lot of different things, a fundraiser for the Ottawa County Parks Foundation as they work to assist the Parks Department in their many goals throughout the next couple years here. Be there. If you are a runner, a walker, an enjoyer of nature, it'll be a great event for everybody. Hashtag 2 parks, 1 race. Next on the board for today is meeting minutes. Now, you may have seen my meeting minutes videos separately here. We are going to start including them in the podcast, so we're going to cut to that right now. Howdy, and welcome back to Meeting Minutes, a 1-ish minute recap of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners meetings. Today we're breaking down the March 25th full board meeting. As always, the meeting began with consent resolutions, which include the approval of last month's board meeting minutes, the minutes from the December 17th Talent and Recruitment Committee meeting, and ratifying contracts from the last month. The Talent and Recruitment minutes and the contract ratification items were moved from this section to the action items. We also saw motions from March 11th standing committee meetings. If you'd like to know more about those, do me a favor and check out our previous episode of meeting minutes. All of these consent resolutions passed. Agenda item A was a motion to nominate 15 individuals to fill 2 general public vacancies on the Community Mental Health Board beginning April 1st, 2025 and ending March 31st, 2028. Paul Duff and Levon Vanderswag were appointed. Items B and C were motions to nominate 6 individuals to fill 2 general public vacancies on the Environmental Health Board beginning immediately, with 1 ending December 31st, 2026 and 1 ending December 31st, 2027. Scott Mueller-Leal and Jamie Fleming were appointed respectively. Item D was a motion to allow the board chair to appoint an elected official to the designated elected official seat on the Materials Management Planning Committee. The motion passed. Item E was a motion to approve the board chair's appointment of Commissioner Moss to the Materials Management Planning Committee. The motion passed. Item F was a motion to ratify all contracts from the last month. 5 of these contracts were split from this motion for further discussion, but motions to approve all of them were ultimately passed. Item G was a motion to approve the minutes from the December 17th Talent and Recruitment Committee meeting. A motion was passed to strike individual comments regarding the candidates from the official minutes, but the motion was ultimately passed. Did you notice that today's agenda was almost exclusively dedicated to committees and board appointments? Of course you did. You're so smart. This is because the Appointment and Alignment Ad Hoc Committee has been hard at work making sure all of these boards and the terms of each appointment align with the individual board's bylaws, the Board of Commissioners rules, and any governing Michigan statutes. The meeting wrapped up with committee reports, commissioner comments, and a special update from Administrator Rosema, who recognized the work of the Children's Advocacy Center as we enter into April, which is designated as Child Abuse Prevention Month. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. And welcome back. As you can see, I am joined by my two guests, Rich Lakeberg from our very own Ottawa County Department of Strategic Impact, and Nick Rolinski from a bunch of things. Why don't we actually start with Rich? I'd like you to just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, and then maybe go into a bit about the Department of Strategic Impact, because it's sort of the name doesn't describe everything that it does, right?
Right, it's very overarching. So my name's Rich Lakeberg. I'm Project Support Specialist for the Department of Strategic Impact. I'm sort of the communications arm and graphic designer for all the different projects that DSI is involved in. So the Department of Strategic Impact used to be called Planning and Performance Improvement, also not very exciting. But a few years ago, our leader, Paul Sachs, along with previous administrations, decided that maybe we wanted to change the name to something more overarching and reflecting the continuous expanding amount of projects that are guiding the county forward that we work on. Some examples: groundwater protection, farmland preservation, high-speed internet service, economic development, as well as evaluation and data support for both internal county departments and external departments.
I would love to do a full episode on DSI at some point. Rich, what got you into this line of work specifically?
Well, my background is in journalism and also graphic design. I worked for several different media organizations up and down the Lake Michigan coast, but as the world changed and my needs changed, I decided to take my writing and graphic design skills and go into public service. And so when a position opened up a few years ago at Ottawa County, I interviewed with Paul and took my skills here.
And the rest is history. And moving on to our other guest, Nick Rolinski of Nicholas Rolinski Design. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I run a sole proprietor design business based out of Holland, Michigan, and about 40% of my work has to do with residential design, and a lot of those residential projects tend to relate to historic houses and historic preservation topics. About 40% of my practice relates to or deals with master planning, community planning, urban design, neighborhood design, town planning, those kinds of things. And then in between those two worlds, the remaining 20% or so has to do with things that kind of overlap. So whether it's a small mixed-use building or whether it's a small civic project, maybe a public project, maybe a nonprofit, maybe a sacred building, that kind of thing, that sort of relates to the residential realm, also relates to the community scale realm, but sort of lands in the middle. And then I also am involved in design education, architecture education, and I'm a member of the faculty at the University of Notre Dame School of Architecture, where I teach within the Master of Science in Historic Preservation program.
That's really cool. Yeah, I saw that. I see that you've worked with Hope College before, and you also have been on a few of the different boards and commissions within Holland that are relevant to your line of work. I know nothing about architecture, engineering, design, anything like that, but I have a lot of respect for it because it really seems like a strong blend of the left and right brain aesthetics and the design, but it also has to be functional and like structurally sound and everything. Where do you find the most fulfillment in that respect?
I think that's well said. It's totally a mashup of both of those sort of modes of thinking, and I like to think of it as, hey, as a designer in architecture or in master planning, we get to be engineers who also get to be artistic, and engineers get to be creative and artistic as well, but I tend to have these moments that happen very frequently where I'm coloring something with colored pencils in my office, and I have to kind of pinch myself and say, this is my day job. I'm actually getting paid
That's the
to
dream.
do this. And so there's this creative side of it, yes. Creative solutions have to be grounded within reality. They have to be grounded within practicality, economic considerations. They have to be buildable. They have to be feasible. There's also a component of it that's it's both creative and practical, but it's maybe a third leg of that stool, which is the stewardship aspect of it. And solutions have to bring something to the table in terms of steering a community or steering the physical build out of a place in a direction that is healthy.
Really interesting, yeah. I like how you included that as its own third piece, and I kind of relate to that because my work, I'm mostly video focused, and it's sort of the same thing where like I would love to do just the most creative thing possible, but it's not always feasible and it's not always the right thing to do either. Just pure creative energy, there needs to be something to rein it in. Well, let's talk about why you're here, and this is one of our more informational episodes so far. We've had a lot of really broad overviews with OCA and the Parks Department, and I'm really excited to get into this particular topic. Recently, the Department of Strategic Impact came out with a concept that they've been working very hard on alongside a few partners, including Nick, and it's the small footprint homes design concept. Rich, can you just start off sort of explaining, sort of an overview description of the project first?
Happily. So the small footprint home development concept, even the name has changed in the past year as this first launched. Working very closely with the Housing Commission, Department of Strategic Impact has some fantastic land planners, including Paul Sachs, who kind of take on these sort of challenges, seeing, everybody is fully aware of the housing challenges that we face in this region as well as the entire country, as far as, availability, affordability, and that sort of thing. And so the Housing Commission, working with Paul, and then Paul recruited Nick, I believe, to sit down and start thinking about how can we start constructing homes that are a little bit smaller in stature but higher in quality at the same time. And the idea is that these attainable dwellings could realistically increase housing stock. Developing this project with the Housing Commission, using their skills and their backgrounds, there are realtors on the Housing Commission, there are, people involved in home construction. These homes would be ideally under 1,000 square feet and situated on appropriately sized lots.
What are the county's goals with this project?
The actual goals of this project are to develop a series of open source architectural plans and material lists that home builders, developers, and citizens can utilize. We also are analyzing zoning and policy barriers, and we want to work with municipalities to allow for smaller footprint homes because over the past half century, really after World War II, zoning became much more common in the United States, and we have kind of almost outlawed on a municipal level building the kind of small homes that we are hoping to add back into the housing stock again.
We're going to talk a little bit about some of the public sentiment that we've seen and how maybe some of it is well intentioned, but not always 100% accurate. One of the issues is, zoning restrictions are going to just stop this project dead in the water. And obviously, we wouldn't be here if there was no hope. So how do we get around these zoning problems?
Sure. Well, I can't speak in the most technical sense of negotiations with individual planning commissions, but through demonstrating these homes and these home concepts, and ideally maybe getting a couple of models built, we can invite local leaders to look at what we're trying to build here. The idea that building these kind of homes is something that's never been done or isn't practical is really an antithesis. It's not true. If you walk around in the historic districts of some of the most beloved towns in West Michigan, these small footprint homes style were built a century ago and are still very lovable, very practical, and architecturally beautiful and sound. How do we do it? We show them. We get them to make exceptions, change some policies, look at it on an uber local level.
There is a process that we've started to implement and explore and kind of play out that is geared around very earnestly stepping into these communities and attempting to capture the essence and the DNA of the built housing stock of those communities. These options are aesthetically very calibrated and very harmonious with what is already there. And we like to say that these designs strive to be at home within Ottawa County. And to do that, they're looking at the really tried and true tested examples that already exist. This is what this county is capable of doing. And to Rich's point, zoning comes along in the 20th century, and we kind of slipped into some habits culturally after World War II that township after township zoning codes sort of evolved, and these sizes became illegal. You know, minimum footprint size or minimum footprint of house crept up, and what this project is seeking to do is recognize that that's an important thing to have on the menu, the small footprint house, and to reclaim that. So going back, I'm kind of taking a long, circular path back to your question, but from a zoning standpoint, we really do need to step into these local units of government, have these conversations, present something that's actually appealing, right? We don't want to just come in and say, we want to foist upon you a house that looks strangely too small for your community and is maybe a little questionable in terms of whether it's really going to work from a practicality standpoint or an economic standpoint. And you have to deal with it because everybody and their brother is saying that there's this affordable housing shortage, so too bad. We want to instead go into these local units of government and really into these communities and say, here is something that you really ought to have on the menu, and it's kind of unfair that that you don't have it available to you at this time.
I'm going to compare this to the iPhone. iPhones started out small, generally, and then people started wanting bigger phones, and that was the trend, and people got bigger phones. And then a few years ago, Apple's like, hey, what if we brought back a smaller phone, not to replace the big phones, but just as an additional option, right? Let's zoom out a little bit, because I really want to make sure we emphasize what the county's role in this is, and at what level is the county involved, right? Are you going out and putting on a hard hat and building the houses yourself? Like what's going on?
Absolutely not. This is especially at this phase. We really want to emphasize that this is a partnership. We're very much in a development phase. We are not necessarily, we're not interested in housing developments ourselves. That's not our role. On a case-by-case basis, there might be some situations where we could be involved on a different level, but this is really just creating a framework, a guide to get this done.
Yeah, and you want to be not only sort of helping to show local units that this is feasible, but then after that, once that's established, partnering with construction partners, not doing the construction ourselves, but actually passing off these designs because they're open concept designs, right?
Exactly.
Open source designs is the word I was going for. Yeah, open concept is a different thing entirely.
That's a layout thing.
Yeah.
I think I could also take this opportunity here to do some debunking. Housing is very much a issue in the forefront of everyone's mind. Some of the things that we aren't doing with this project, for example, there is some nomenclature that can be a little bit difficult to navigate when, it does sound a little bit legalese to, dance around and say, we're talking about a small footprint home. Okay, don't you mean a tiny home? Not exactly, no.
Right. What sets homes in this concept apart from that, like, those have been around for quite a few years now, the tiny home concept.
So, and Nick can get into more of the technical aspects of this, but, the trendy tiny home movement of a few years ago was a very interesting movement, but that's not what we're building here. These homes are not mobile. They're not on wheels. And a tiny home.
They're built on a real
These
foundation.
These are built on real
They're permanent.
foundations, whether or not it's a slab foundation or a poured concrete foundation. And a tiny home, as defined by International Residential Code, is a dwelling under 400 square feet. Now, the smallest home that we have in our toolbox is about 400 square feet, but that's the smallest. We're also looking at the largest concept is a little over 1,000 square feet, isn't it, Nick?
How do we balance the use of government resources and government intervention with, allowing the housing market to be a free housing market?
The nature of, like the West Michigan, self-reliance, can-do spirit, the idea of that individuality is a goal that most of us share. And Ottawa County, for its part in this project, the idea is to do this without any government subsidies. Not to say that couldn't happen at some point in the future, but generally speaking, that is not the goal of this. The idea is to build momentum through local channels and to just take down some of the policy barriers that developed at a municipal level across the country over the past 60 plus years. So really just, on an individualized basis, what's right for your community. It's about looking at land planning at a regional level and using our land wisely, building where there's existing infrastructure, keeping our towns, keeping our rural areas, thinking about it and on a regional standpoint. This all feeds into that as part of a better vision.
All of the units of government that may have interest in this and where this type of housing may be appropriate have to reckon with the fact that they may have sort of a mismatch in zoning and a mismatch culturally in terms of how to get these projects through. And so it's a perfect role for a county level of government to come in and do some overarching kind of regional thinking and lead on the thinking side, and then turn around and supply the lessons learned and the insights from a project like this to the townships or to the cities. And then those townships and cities don't have to all reinvent the wheel and make those investments on their own. It is not very good leadership to put our head in the sand and pretend that regionally here in this county there's not a need for housing. The county is too good. The county is too appealing and attractive to people who don't live here right now, who might want to live here, for us to pretend like growth pressure isn't real. Growth pressure is very real.
Shoot, we've established an amazing county that people want to live in.
Yeah.
Shoot.
So the question is, do we become a victim of our own success and our own, strengths and assets as a county, or do we respond to these needs and these growth pressures? Let's step up and start to explore what kind of housing stock would be appropriate, what kind of housing stock do we want, and what's the quality of that housing stock, and how do we arrange it and organize it?
Yeah, that really gets me thinking, like that hypothetical that when we as a county have absolutely no say or interest, I feel like that's going to sort of exacerbate a lot of the big issues that we're thinking about right now: farmland preservation, groundwater issues. Rich, can you kind of talk about how, when you think, oh no, more housing development, that means we're going to be making these problems worse, right?
That kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before about land planning and having like a more regional vision, and then Nick emphasizing having a stake in your community and thinking about how and where and when things are built. Yes, we have a groundwater problem in certain parts of this county. It happens to be mostly in rural areas in the central portion of the county. It happens to also be near areas that are relatively less expensive to construct in. So historically, where do developers want to go where they can build a lot of subdivisions very quickly in rural areas and not have to worry about municipal infrastructure. They go to the more rural areas and the collar areas. And those are the areas that, with our groundwater crisis, we need to think about density. But the point is putting smaller footprint homes on smaller lots isn't necessarily going to put extreme pressure on our deep water aquifer system, especially if we're building in the places that we're encouraging these small footprint homes to be built, which is where existing infrastructure already exists. Where do the people that want to own these homes want to live? Well, they want to be near amenities. So we're going to be building near existing infrastructure, and another term that land planners use often is infill development, where there are uniquely sized lots and land that isn't being used to its, what's the term in planning, highest and best use? We could have a whole segment just on groundwater, and we probably should.
Yeah. Cool. You free an hour from now? No.
Sure.
Great. Well, I'm really interested in learning a bit more about the intentions and vision for this project. Are these being designed for a particular demographic, whether it's income level, family size, et cetera, et cetera?
Sure. Yes. People. Humans.
Ooh.
These houses
Aliens,
are being
back
built
off.
for humans. Yes, sorry. If you're not from Earth, these are not for you. We could call them workforce housing. We could call them for our aging population, or maybe someone like Scott who doesn't want to have 3,000 square feet of home to clean every week.
No way.
The point is this is not ideally for one demographic. Yes, we are trying to build homes that are smaller footprint and are definitely going to be at a much lower price point than the average cost of a brand new home in Ottawa County right now. But by no means is this for just one demographic. It's open to everyone.
And this sort of ties back into one of the first conversations we had about fitting these homes into existing neighborhoods and areas, not just physically, but also culturally, architecturally, and really not trying to change the fabric of a community, but improve the existing fabric, right?
Absolutely. And I think, Nick, if you want to describe the 4 concepts and talk about that.
Do we want to bring them out?
Sure.
Bring them out, bring them out. If you're listening, you might want to switch over to YouTube for this part of it, just saying. So what the heck is this?
Okay, so this is a totally hypothetical site design. So this is not a real site, but it shows how the small footprint homes, one possible arrangement where we have each of the different layouts and different sizes, and also we have kind of a demonstration here of some of the characters that you might encounter in Ottawa County. So those 4 character areas or context areas are in town. So we have small towns, we have larger towns, cities in Ottawa County, and so picture your typical neighborhood of blocks and leafy streets with sidewalks and elementary schools. Then we have a context area that we're calling Lake and Dune. So Lake is recognizing that, hey, we are very fortunate to be a lakeshore county. We're on Lake Michigan, but it's actually broader than that because we have Spring Lake, we have Lake Makatawa, we have all kinds of inland lakes that may or may not be connected to larger lakes. But the whole culture of living on and settling on and building communities on waterfront, and the architecture in those settings could be kind of urban and like in town. But it could also be a little bit more playful and a little bit more recreationally oriented or a little bit more nature oriented. The rural and agricultural and kind of farming one, you could imagine, and you probably can recognize this as you drive through the county, the architecture kind of changes. Rich said something really wise before. He mentioned letting the towns be the towns and letting the rural areas stay rural and be truly rural.
Yeah.
And when you get into those rural settings, they're enchanting. They're beautiful. And they absolutely are a fundamental key aspect of the identity of this county and of the communities in this county. The last context area is it's a forested setting. It might be secluded. You might not have, you might not be within earshot of your neighbors. And that's another thing that you can experience here in Ottawa County. And so the architecture out there can be a little bit more woodsy. And the color palette can be a little bit more naturalistic. And so those are material choices and kind of some of the architectural embellishments and ornamentation that allow us to key these into their settings with a little bit more sensitivity. But then also, as you can see in this drawing, we have these different layouts. So these two structures here are our smallest layout option. They're right now drawn as a 20-foot by 20-foot square. Squares happen to be the cheapest kind of floor plan shape to build. I'm probably going to increase that size a little bit to get us a little bit more safe separation from the whole tiny home definition that Rich clarified in terms of the building code. We'd probably go up to about 480 square feet. And that will give a little bit more elbow room in the living spaces as well. The next size up is this one here, just over 600 square feet, and it's a little bigger. It's offering a porch, and so it's really geared to help establish kind of a public space that might be lined with houses. Maybe they're small footprint houses from our project. Maybe there are other houses that are built by other developers or existing houses. But this porch establishes kind of a social moment where it's very visitable, it's very social, it's very welcoming. But it's a very important kind of piece of hardware that helps establish an overarching kind of community sensibility. Porches are really important for that. So you see in the next size up, we have a kind of just over 800 square foot house. And this one also has a porch, but this porch is kind of a chunk that's taken out of the footprint, whereas this porch is actually kind of like an extension beyond the footprint of the interior space. These can all be expressed for any of the four concept areas within Ottawa County. So this one is kind of a mashup. We're showing it in a setting that's fairly woodsy, fairly naturalistic, but there are some aspects of this, like the little crown over the windows, or some of the porch elements that might be more appropriate for like in a city setting or in an in-town setting. And then we have elements like these exposed rafter tails, which we see kind of in lots of different building types, but are particularly appropriate and charming, near the beach or in rustic settings. I want to talk about that word lovability a little bit because it's so important for the whole zoning conversation. Like, are we going to allow this kind of thing in our community? Are we going to change our zoning to allow that? Well, if this place is just undeniably lovable and it's in the next township over, how long before your township is going to say, well, why can't we build like that? Why can't we do something like that? That's one. So we need these things to be really kind of undeniably cool and sweet and appealing and wanted, right? We can't be only saying, hey, you have to deal with the compromise of living small, but we're not going to offer, some upsides and some pluses. But the other thing that lovability brings with it is a kind of sustainability, a kind of resilience. If this is truly loved, it is not going to age in a way that looks terrible in 30 years. And I really want to pause on that point and really emphasize this. If we have this housing need that is this critical and this serious and this big of a scale in Ottawa County, and we slap together hastily built communities and houses in response to that need or because growth pressure is driving it and we're on the sidelines, we will get a build out that is expired, it is tired, it is fatigued in 20 or 30 years. It will look terrible in 20 or 30 years. And so one of the things that smaller houses allows us to do is to actually retain some of the good detail, retain some of the materiality, because guess what? It's not a 3,000 square foot box, it's a 800 square foot box. So maybe we can spring for the nicer materials. Maybe we can actually do exposed rafter tails.
Yeah, a little attention to detail.
Right.
Yeah, but I think through fantastic explanation and all the points. This is a well thought out project and a concept that has intentionality behind it. What else do you guys want to show off? We have another whole board.
Well, I was just going to mention
Yeah.
that as part of building this project out and coming up with these home designs, Nick and Matt are working very closely with the housing commissioners and tapping into their skills and connections to build real world priced out material lists of high quality materials that we want to recommend, not necessarily require, but recommend using to build these homes.
What's all this?
So this is, I think it's 127 different patterns that were collected by a group of our team. So myself, Matt Dobb from Hope College, engineering student, and highly capable architecturally minded designer, as well as you, Rich, Paul Sachs, the director of the Department of Strategic Impact, and then a number of sort of concerned citizen collaborators. We had, and then we also had members of the Housing Commission join us. And so we went to, I mentioned it before, but we went to Zealand, which is a gorgeous, setting for this kind of benchmarking. Matt and I did a fair amount of this work in Holland. We went to a beachy dune kind of setting in Grand Haven. Saw some old pre-war craftsmanship that was really exquisite, and sort of allowed us. It reminded us of this is the range of architectural vocabulary that actually is found in Ottawa County. And then we went to Strawberry Point Park, which for me was the highlight in Spring Lake, because it paired together small footprint homes on small footprint lots with really fabulous public space that was created as a result of how the homes were situated. That was paired with a waterfront setting, so you get that iconic waterfront kind of vibe that Ottawa County has all over the place. And so we were looking for patterns. And so when we discovered a pattern, for instance, let me find a good example here. Here's one. It looks like it might have been drawn by Matt. It's a shed dormer, and he's got a description. It's a low pitch shed attic level dormer. He's got a location where he saw it in Holland. He's got the context categories. So we talked about in town, we talked about rural, agricultural, rural, forest, and lake and dune as the 4 context categories. He checked the box for in town because that's where he saw it. He's got a great little sketch of what that shed dormer looked like. So some examples of keywords include the massing, the proportion, materiality, craftsmanship, but also other things like story, ritual, tradition.
Very clearly, so much thought and intentionality has gone into this. Yeah, Rich, you have something you want to add? For sure.
Oh, just very briefly, me not being an architect, not in the actual, home building fields, when I did this practice, I absorbed so much just in those 2 hours. And once you start observing these fine details of just one neighborhood, and for example, in Strawberry Point, you start seeing them everywhere.
Yeah, so once you see this stuff, it's hard to unsee it. Yeah. And you start to kind of be a tourist in your own community where you're starting to pick up on all these different things. And so, once again, if you're wondering, is this a healthy thing? Is small footprint homes a healthy thing to think about introducing to your municipality? Understanding that one of the strategies for this project is to unlock this, as well as the affordability, the attainability, the livability, all those things. We are bringing a holistic package, or at least that's the attempt here.
Well, that was a really interesting look at some of the materials that you guys have produced as a part of this. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It's very obvious that thoughtfulness and care were really the driving motivations of this.
Yeah, the question came up before of what is the role of the county when this is a township level thing. And one thing that the county can do is it can come in to a given project in a given township or city, and it can point to this exercise and say, this is the kind of intentionality that we've brought to these designs to address concerns that these things may not fit in. It's a perfect example of what the Department of Strategic Impact can do and then come alongside a given project or a given municipal staff and planning commission and work with them and offer that, free of charge, open source, and just say, look, this work is already done. It's turnkey. You can build on it. You can riff on it however you need to. We're not starting at square one, and we're not reinventing the wheel one township at a time. That takes some pressure off of local township municipal staff to tee that up every time fresh and new. Yeah. They can use our materials in response to that developer coming in and saying, look, we are glad that you are here. We are glad that you as a developer have taken interest in our community. We want to yes and your idea of building housing here. So we are by no means saying blanket statement, let's just do tiny homes and unlock small footprint housing everywhere. We're saying, yes, that's a helpful thing to have on the menu, but paired with some of these strategies that have to go along with that. Something needs to be recognized about Ottawa County, I think, broadly, which is that in some parts of the country, there are fires. In some parts of the country, it's downright crazy to invest in building right now because of rising water levels. In some parts of the country, there is economic stagnation, right? And so in our little corner of Michigan and of this country, we have so much going for us. It's very reasonable to assume and predict that anybody who looks at Ottawa County is going to be very enticed by what it offers. And so, once again, these growth pressures are very real. We need to take them seriously. It's just too good, too beautiful, too much beautiful forest, too much beaches, dunes, awesome little towns, for us to pretend like we're not going to have growth pressure to deal with or to address and absorb and somehow harness, right? Harness for good, positive development. And so it's not that Ottawa County is like uniquely positioned in some really... It's not that it's unique in that it's well suited for this. It's that it's unique in that it is kind of in the crosshairs or in kind of a perfect storm of reasons why growth is coming, right? And therefore, it's in a unique position where this is really an important tool to add to the toolbox.
Yeah, and we want to be in front of it. We want to be proactive versus waiting until, housing gets even harder to find, and we're dealing with currently $200,000 homes turning into $600,000 homes, and then now let's start thinking of ideas to bring costs down and to provide people with options.
The housing will be built, so the community, the opportunity is there for us to say we could build really great housing, which isn't just roofs over our heads as like just fundamental shelter, but it's actually housing that is additive to the making of our towns and the making of our public spaces, which are second to none, just like everything else in the county.
Yeah.
We're not just, as Nick says, unlocking certain restrictions so we can just copy and paste 100,000 homes in every spot of the county. No, this is the careful land planning, strategically thinking about community by community, municipality by municipality on a micro scale. So, we need to add small footprint homes positioned on appropriately sized lots to the menu and to permit these and build them out, but by no means excluding larger footprint homes or waving our finger and say we only have to build density. It's by careful land use and forethought to help manage the growth and say, yes, Ottawa County is a very attractive place and will continue to grow. But by taking the time to carefully plan this out, we can do it right.
And that's what's up.
I would just want to acknowledge the work of the housing commissioners. They've been supportive for going on a year now of this project. They've been collaborative. We've actually asked them to pick up some of the legwork when it comes to pricing, and they've come back, at housing commission meetings and brought homework that they did. And so they've been extremely supportive. They challenge us, they push back on us for, at the appropriate times, but they have also, I think, really been open-minded. And I've been really impressed by that open-mindedness and that collaborative spirit that they've had. We have a collaborator named Katie Crothers, who's on our kind of workforce task force team here, who is a interior designer, and she has been producing interior renderings. So we looked today at some exterior views, but what's it like to be inside these? And she's really taken the ball and run with that. And so that's been really cool. I want to also once again acknowledge Matthew Daub, who I mentioned a couple of times, but he's an engineering student at Hope College. He's drawn all of this stuff. He's done a lot of the legwork. And I laugh because I think about like our Ottawa County Housing Commission project or meetings are 10 o'clock in the morning here, at the Fillmore Complex. And he's up there presenting, and, nobody would guess that he's a college sophomore. They would think that he's, a professional member of the team. So I get a kick out of it because I picture his colleagues back at Hope College who are sophomores in their PJs, sleeping in or showing up to class in their PJs. And here's Matt presenting to the Ottawa County Housing Commission at this very, very great level. So he's just a total rock star, and he's been the reason why this project has marched along and made tangible progress routinely. So that's been really cool. And then I also want to acknowledge Paul Sachs, who's the director of DSI, who is just a visionary leader, and was, he recruited me into the project, and it was a really easy sell because when Paul Sachs comes and asks for your help, there's, he makes it very appealing to appear and provide, whatever assistance you can. So he's been really enabling and helpful through this project, and he does bring a collaborative kind of aspect to it, that when the Department of Strategic Impact does come alongside a township government or a city government for these real projects, having Paul's presence in the process is really critical, because he's a community-wide leader, and he's a respected leader, and so that's why this project exists. Yeah,
not to mention the dad jokes.
Oh yeah,
he's great with those. I got a kick out of his MC work at the Water Quality Forum. Gentlemen, I appreciate you coming on. I hope that our listeners and viewers appreciate all the work that's been put into this and the time you've taken to come on here and talk about it. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these homes be built eventually. That's going to be really interesting, and I can't wait to see what comes as a result of this directly and indirectly. So thanks a bunch, and best of luck. Wow, guys, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. That was a fantastic conversation with Rich and Nick about the Small Footprint Homes project. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you did too. This is a great project with a lot of options. It just opens up so many opportunities for the county and you, the residents. So really grateful to them for being a part of the project, but of course coming on to the podcast to talk about it. That's all I've got for you here today, folks. Remember, knowledge is power, and local government works best when you're a part of it. We'll see you next time. Text me when you get home safe. Thanks for listening to Ottawa Out Loud. Make sure to let us know what you think with a like, review, or comment, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Check the description for links to everything we talked about in the show. See you next time.